And like I could go back now and it would be like, and you're blowing the dust off of it, right? Because nobody's ever looked at it.
Hello and welcome to episode 257 of the Rockstar CMO FA Marketing Podcast. It's Wednesday the 5th of February. I hope you're well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. I'm your host Ian Truscott. I'm not a rockstar, but I am a CMO, and on this podcast I chat with a group of chums who share their marketing street knowledge, which I hope will bring out the rockstar marketer in you. In the marketing studio this week, one of those chums, Cathy McKnight, the chief solver of problems at the Seventh Bear, returns for her monthly visit, and we chat about building teams and some of her amazing client experience. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back. After this word. We'll be right back. After this word.
My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Would you wear the same shoes for every occasion? Or rock the same outfit 7 days a week? Of course not. Your style is better with options. Your investments could be too. SIBO Index options give you access to various contract sizes, global trading hours, and potential tax advantages. That's a good look for any portfolio. If you're ready to invest in style, head to betterwithoptions.com. There are risks associated with SIBO company products. Review the disclosures and disclaimers at sibo.com/US_disclaimers.
Welcome back, Cathy, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I am well, Ian. How are you? Thank you for having me back.
Oh, you're always welcome. It's lovely to speak to you anytime. I don't need to be recording either.
Well, thank you.
How's lovely Toronto? Is it lovely?
Covered in snow, not too cold today, so all is well.
All is well. And you like a bit of snow, though, don't you?
I do. You know what? Between December and March, if it's going to be cold, we may as well have snow. And then April 1st, it can all go away.
Yes, jolly good. Well, we don't quite. I don't have anything to look forward to. I just have cold and grey today. So, you know what the UK weather's like. You've been here.
Oh, yes.
Quite frequently, and you just waiting for that to end and some weather to start, and the spring and stuff like that. But that's the weather, and we always do the weather on the show, so that's our first agenda item. But today, I wanted to have a chat. Well, I mean, like I say, you're welcome at any time you like to come on, and I think you come on once a month. But last week, you did a webinar, and your webinar was about teamwork, and I thought, this is a good topic, especially for folks that are new in marketing, in the marketing leadership role, or they need to freshen things up a bit. We need to think about how our teams work. And I think in the new year, new you, new team, it's a good time to think about this. So you hosted a webinar with Robert, and I'm sure that, and what I really like about what you share in your webinars, and I'll have a link to your webinar series in the show notes, is you and Robert have got and it's always a joy to talk to you guys about anything, but you've got so much of this real world client experience, and you can hear it that this didn't just come from a book. This was like, oh God, yeah, I lived this stuff, right? So your webinar was called Teamwork Unlocking the Magic of Collaboration. And I'm going to start off with a bit of a low ball. No, what's it? A slow ball? What's the baseball term?
Lob ball.
Okay, one of them balls.
Easy. An easy toss.
An easy toss. Because we all know that teamwork makes the dream work and all of that. But you've clearly felt the need to address this topic because you do all sorts of topics, don't you, on your webinar? AI, content operations, content strategy, and you've gone into teamwork. So why did you feel the need to do this, and what are you seeing with your clients at the moment?
So part of it was, with our rebrand from the content advisory to Seventh Bear, was really a lot of that was based on our reflection, looking back over the last, 3 or 4 years in the work that we're doing. And a lot of it is about herding the cats. It's about getting the teams ready to do the work. Sure, we're doing strategy and roadmaps, and we're helping people understand like content and audience and all of that stuff in terms of marketing and content. But when it gets down to it, it's all about the team. People have to be first, always. You got to think about your team. And I started off my career in internal communications. So I've always had a soft spot and probably a stronger focus on the internal audience than most typical marketing or content consultants, because we look at the outside as our target audience. But I've always pulled the employees into the conversation. So this was, Robert and I were setting out our content calendar for the year and what kind of topics we wanted to cover. And teamwork was the first one out of the gate we totally agreed on. And things that I want people to understand, that we want people to understand, is it's got to start with the people, right? So marketing isn't just about strategy and execution. You've got to think about the people behind the work. And the best way to build strong output and good, solid, whether it's content, whether it's strategy, whether it is a campaign, whatever it is getting the team to be able to talk to each other, collaborate and communicate. And so many teams don't have that. And it's gotten worse since COVID because remote or hybrid situations. And they're not getting direction, right? So they don't know. They're sort of given a task and then they huddle off into their corners and go.
What I was thinking was where this experience would come from, because, obviously I've done a lot of advisory and consulting as well, is sometimes you think, well, this advice is great. This strategy is great. This is going to work. And then you look at their organization and go, this isn't going to work. Was that the sort of experience you were having?
Absolutely. We, of course, like any professional, any artist, anybody who's been doing something for a long time, you have a methodology, you have a way of approaching things because it's logical. It makes sure you don't miss things. But we never go into a client saying, this is the answer. Because until we actually meet with them, understand their organization, really get into some of the idiosyncratic elements that make them who they are, that's when you have to tailor it. So sure, we have a methodology, we know what works, but it has never been a rinse and repeat. Because when it comes to collaboration, teamwork, governance, there's some core best practices, absolutely. But you have to take into consideration who it is that is going to be executing this work, right? So who are the people? Like I said, people first. And it's only by looking at that first and then figuring out, okay, where's the direction? How should they be structured from if we're helping them with team structure, how do we create those buckets of work that needs to get done functionally, but so that they're enabled to communicate and collaborate as well?
Do you find that's how the conversation? I mean, I recently did an advisory for a tech firm, and ostensibly the advisory was supposed to be about one particular work stream and topic, but then it quickly became about the team that were going to do the implementation, and that's how the advisory evolved into team structure and who should do what. Is that a sort of experience you have as well? That that's where this comes from.
Yes. Yeah. It's very rarely in a box, right? Whatever the SOW says. And we know that. And we go in, and there have been times where we've gotten into a client, they've asked for A, we get in there, we see that they need G. And so we say, hey, listen, this is what you've asked for. We can absolutely do it. But this would make more sense to do this and then that. And so sometimes we change our scope of work because the budget is what it is and there's no flexibility. So we work around it so they're getting what they need on both fronts. Sometimes they're like, oh my gosh, you're absolutely correct. So they extend the SOW and they add a piece so we can do the prelim work first. Sometimes it's just a prelim work and we don't actually get to the other stuff. And sometimes they're like, no, do what we asked. And quite often it is that because they don't, I don't know if you've had the experience, but there's been people who have hired us who just, they've been told to do this. We need X. They don't actually want X because we're going to move their cheese, right? We're invoking change, and change causes friction. And one thing we're talking a lot about is this valuable friction, and you need that to move forward. You need to look at that and have that happen so you can see, okay, is this really a problem, or is it the people that's the problem, or is it a lack of clarity that's the problem? And the friction is what gets you to the answer to that so that you can address it.
That's always a tricky thing, isn't it? When you're asked a question and you're saying, you're asking the wrong question, and it's like, no, I've been told to ask this question, have this question answered. And as you sort of dig into it, you're like, this isn't the right question. This isn't the right answer. I mean, the answer's going to be, it'll answer the question, but I don't think this is going to help you.
Yeah.
And that's always a challenge, isn't it? When you're consulting, because your heart sinks a little bit, don't you? Because you think, well,
there are so many. I mean, I love the work that I do. I chose consulting because I love the variety. I love the change. I love the constant difference and the different challenges and whatnot. It suits my personality. But there are times where, we've walked away like high-fiving going, damn, that was an excellent deliverable. Like we nailed it. And you just know it's sitting on the proverbial shelf, right? I go back to my IBM days when we used to deliver stuff and it would be like binders of solution in terms of the coding and the projects we were building. And like I could go back now and it would be like, and you're blowing the dust off of it, right? Because nobody's ever looked at it.
It's funny, that's the mental model I had as you were talking of that very thing, this digital shelf and all the dust. So you talked there about communication was one of the things that you see, and you also, the sort of advice you were giving, kind of upstream advice, you could see there were some downstream problems with the organization. And then as I was listening to the webinar, let's get back to your webinar.
Sure.
You described a concept called the collaboration edge, sorry. What did you mean by that? Do you want to share with the listeners that?
So the collaboration edge is looking at what do you need? Like, what are the pieces of the puzzle that need to be in place for collaboration to work?
Right.
So foundationally, you have to create, going back to your first question, if, resetting and what would you work on? Culture of open communication and feedback, right? Creating a space where team members feel comfortable contributing, not just in their, lane, but when they see things that, oh, what about this or what about that, new ideas, and they're not going to get their hand slapped for it, or people aren't going to get their knickers in a knot about it. So having an open, and that comes from leadership. That's not just saying, oh yeah, you're welcome. My door is open all the time. Yet you can't get into their calendar to have a conversation, right? Or you make a suggestion and then you get reamed at because somebody was pissed off and they've gone and told their boss, and it's looped back to you. So that true open of communication and collaboration, and that culture of that, and having your leadership not only walk the walk and talk the talk, but defend it, right? So they're the ones that are doing that with other teams as well. But the collaboration edge is kind of trifold, I would say, is having shared purpose. So everybody needs to know why they're collaborating and what success looks like. So, if you're working on a project, an intake form, that initial conversation should be, okay, let's say it's a marketing piece. Who's the audience? Why is it important that we reach them with this? Like, what are they looking for? So what are we solving for them? And how are we going to measure success, right? So having those baseline items, having the right tools and processes, right? So that things keep moving. So the things that you can execute without being reliant on somebody, you heads down and go, and it's ready for the next person when they need it. But also, so there's an accountability where you're ready to go, but the work preceding you isn't ready yet. So we know where it sits. We know where the gaps. It's not a matter of me going to, track people down. Have you done this? Have you done this? So the transparency in the process and the workflows. And then it's, again, going back to that safe space, right? Having the trust and psychological safety where they can share ideas, where they can challenge norms. One of the things that I've been doing a lot with Hilton, we put in some core tenets for the project, for the team that I work with. And one of those, or two of them, is radical transparency and a bias towards action. So we're enabling those changes in behavior, because when somebody doesn't know quite how to start the conversation, or if they have an idea, but they it's not necessarily in their area, then they can invoke the tenet and say, hey, listen, in the spirit of a bias towards action, what do you think about this? What do you think about moving forward on that? Or in the spirit of radical transparency, can you tell me more about why you think this is a good idea, right? So creating that safe space is really, really important. Collaboration isn't just throwing everybody into a Zoom call and hoping it goes well. Just because you've assembled the team, that doesn't make it collaboration.
I like that. I mean, so many times we've been involved in sort of values and all that kind of discussions in my career, and they get put in that proverbial place where your IBM folders went, which is nobody really pays any attention. I like the fact that it sounds like at Hilton they're using them for good purpose, in that it's giving them a language to raise these topics in meetings, if that's the right way of describing it. I think that's interesting. The other thing about shared purpose, when you were talking about that, and on the webinar I thought about this as well, is that we, on this podcast and on Rockstar CMO, we talk a lot about OKRs, and I became a bit of a convert to OKRs in a gig that I was doing. Is that the sort of thing, when you talk about shared purpose, is it that specific? It's like, what are your objectives? What are the key results? And how are we going to measure it? Rather than sort of something a bit more loosey-goosey, it's actually driving those things. It is, and it's not just the project outcomes, right? So it's not just for OKR, objectives and key results, for those who aren't into the lexicon. It's not just setting, whether it's OKRs or KPIs, key performance indicators, for the work that you're doing, but it's for the work itself. So when we look at projects now, some of the stuff that we look at are measuring, how is communication? How is the process? That's part of the baseline measurement for success of any project within this team now. We're looking at how it's moving forward for the next one as well. So not just about the work being done, tick the box, you achieved all the goals of the actual project work, but how the work got done. How well did that go? And that's being evaluated. And you have to measure that, because if you're not measuring it, then that's when workarounds become the way of doing things. People don't feel they need to adhere to the process and engage through the workflow and do all the things that they're supposed to. And one of the things I like about OKRs, and we'll move on to silos in a sec, because I really like some points you made in the webinar about silos, is that the difference with an OKR is there's usually like an objective at sort of like a company level, and then they ripple down to all the different departments. I think part of the challenge with setting objectives and goals, and I did an engagement actually years ago with a very large financial organization when I lived in the US, and the CMO asked us to come in and do an evaluation. And what we found was actually all the different marketing teams had their own goals, and were also succeeding against those goals, right? But they were, as a group, it was incoherent in terms of what they were doing. And some of them were competing with each other in terms of what they were doing. So I think that, and we'll get onto silos in it, I think this shared purpose is important to overcome the silos as well, isn't it?
It is. And one of the things, if you look at, stepping back into my former world of employee engagement and satisfaction, is one of the key things that drive employee satisfaction is understanding how they contribute to the larger goals of the organization. So no matter where you are in the org, whether you're, a new hire at a university or whether you've been there for 15 years, understanding how what you do, even, sorting mail and distributing it, right? Or shredding the paper, or taking notes in a meeting, whatever it is, being able to articulate to that individual so that they understand how that contributes to the greater good and the ultimate success, that's what drives them. That's what makes an employee committed, want to innovate, want to do better. And so there are so many teams, like you mentioned, where they're actually, the work that they're doing is counterproductive to the work that their teammates are doing or other parts of the org. And most organizations don't necessarily have a set of core, here's our goals and objectives for the year. They'll have financial ones, but they might not have like statements. And thus, you can't have the next layer down. So operations, marketing, technology, finance. And then through there, again, the next layer down, because from the bottom up, it should be rolling up so that you should understand how it goes into the next level of the goals, to the next level, ultimately to how it's contributing to the organizational goals for the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also they give visibility to the individual. Like you were saying, not only does the individual then feel like understand the value of what their contribution is to the bigger OKR sort of web, right, all the way, or hierarchy all the way to the top. But also somebody in a senior position can sort of track all the way down and actually see, oh, this person's contribution to our revenue is they do this, this, and this. And, they feel seen, right? Because usually these OKR models are very open, aren't they? That anybody can see what anybody's working on. I think that's cool. But anyway, I loved you were talking, I'm sure that you and I have had this conversation a number of times about busting the silos, because we lived through an era of software that always claimed to bust the silos, right? But of course, we both know silos are kind of the human condition. It's the way we naturally organize. And I admit, when I'm running larger marketing teams in bigger companies, I organize the team by specialism and region, right? You have your field marketers, demand marketers, all that kind of good product marketers, and you have them in region. And so you create these silos, you create these teams. But I think you made the point that these silos need to be permeable, but I don't think that was the right word. I don't think that's the one you used in the in the webinar. So what's your advice there? How do we have silos but don't have silos?
So boundaries have been a part of human nature since we crawled out of the water, right? It's, this is my piece of beach. This is my cave. This is my fire. Like we go back, we're territorial by nature. That's just, that's the nature of mammals and well, all animals really. So don't try and kill a bajillion years of, evolution by trying to make it not. I mean, we worked with Facebook. That is a flat organization. It is chaos.
Really?
Absolute chaos.
Yeah.
So silos aren't the enemy, right? Silos provide expertise, efficiencies, focus. But they do, permeable is the word. They need to be permeable and purpose-driven. So it can't be that it's got these high walls, think of like a tower where everybody's contained in it, but rather, it's the shoulder height cubes or fence that you can look over. You can easily pass things over, that there's, maybe there's doors and windows that you can go through every once in a while, right? And think about bridges, not walls, right? Think about interdisciplinary collaboration, with teams sharing knowledge. And again, that going back to that common objective. So bringing teams in early. So that kickoff meeting for projects, whomever, whatever part of the team will be a part of the execution at any point in time, whether it's, day 1 or day 207, bring them in at the beginning, get their input, let them understand the goals, let them provide their expertise to help shape the best possible outcome. If you pull people in only when you think they're needed, now they're just executing tasks. You're actually not asking them for their expertise. You're not enabling them to help you do better.
Yeah. And because you need team of specialists, but you need them to feel like the objective is common, right? It's it's not. I like that. And I see in the notes here you've got cross team rituals, or notes from the webinar. What do you mean by cross team rituals? I like that.
So regular team alignment meetings, right? I've just worked with a client where we were working on their rejigging their team structure and realigning it to be less literal, both the team name and the titles and things like that. And part of the thing part of the work that I did in Discovery was to meet with the team members as well as do a survey, like what's working, what's not, how, where would you like to see improvements, et cetera. And one of the things was that they wanted to be better connected as a team. So we put together, one of the recommendations I did for them and built for them was a content calendar for team meetings, for team interactions, right? So think about it, from both a project base, but audience base is along your axes. And then, when to have stand-ups, when to have all team meetings, structure of them and that kind of thing. Don't make it so that it's onerous. We all have way too many meetings. We jammed our calendar when everybody was at home during COVID, and we never took the meetings off, right? We need to stop that.
Yeah.
But, team alignment. So checking in. So it's not about what are you working on? It's how are you feeling? How can I help you? Right? It's that more human side. So those alignment meetings on that, having shared and team KPIs. And again, KPIs, OKRs, not just about the work, but about the team culture, about the communication, about transparency. Measure yourself against that. How are you doing? How are the team feeling about those kind of things?
The
And
soft
then
stuff. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And then joint initiatives, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that if they're not happening organically, prescribing the connection so that it is built, so that it gets meshed together.
Yeah. I've seen things like tiger teams put together as well, like specialists from the different organizations that can work. But I really, that resonates with me in terms of, I think that Zoom virtual meetings, Teams, Zoom, whatever it is that you use, they tend to be incredibly transactional, and you miss any of that kind of how you really have to work hard to keep cultural type conversations happening in those kinds of meetings, because in real life you grab a coffee, you mill around for a bit, the meeting starts 5 minutes late, you have a little chat, whereas Zoom calls tend to be, they start on the button, the agenda starts, and off you go, and you tend to lack a little bit of that interpersonal stuff that you were just referring to, I think.
Well, and everybody's multitasking.
Yeah.
Everybody has more than one screen now. So where it used to be, you had one screen, you could tell if somebody was doing this, right?
Yeah.
And now people have 2, 3 screens. They got, massive screens. So they got multiple windows open. So you don't have that accountability of face-to-face where I go into meeting, like when we're leading meetings, I ask people respectfully to close their laptops and flip their phones over.
Yeah.
If you're taking notes, fine. But by the way, I'm recording our session, so I'll send you the transcript. I'm transparent in that way.
Yeah.
You want to take notes? Great. I appreciate that. But
you can't do that in a virtual meeting either, can you? I mean, it's all you can do is to make sure everybody has their camera switched on, let alone turn their phone.
Do it, right?
No,
exactly. It's I'm having a bad hair day or blah blah. It's no, like let's all be adults here.
Yeah. I just do a quick time check with you, Cathy, and while we're recording, are we all right for another 5 or 10 minutes?
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. I just realised the time, and you know what you and me like. I think we were chatting too much before I press record. So I'm going to get on to what I'm pretty sure you're going to have one of these, Cathy, because I know you well enough. You have a methodology, I should think, to apply to make our teams work better. How do you approach organizational challenges with your clients?
So as I think we talked about at the outset of this, is diagnose first and then prescribe later, right? So go in and really find out what the problem is. So talk to people, do a survey, have a workshop. Every team is unique. And so we don't go in and fix things before we understand the root issue. Because if you don't know what's causing it, if the foundation has got a crack on the left-hand side and you build up on that rather than balancing the load or repairing the crack, then it's all going to fall apart. So really, and then validate. Okay, so here's what we heard. Here's what we understand. Do you agree? Does that make sense? And there's been times where somebody, people have come back and go, oh, I know who you heard that from. That's an isolated point of view. And sure enough, it was, right? So great. Once you understand, you've got the diagnosis, you've figured out where the major things to address are, is then start looking at bottlenecks. Where are things really slowing down? We tend to lean into working on things that we're good at and that are working well and making them better, because it's, of course, who doesn't want to feel better about themselves and do better and whatnot? And I'm not suggesting that shouldn't happen, but by doing that and not focusing on where the gaps are or where things are really lagging, is you start creating this mountain and chasm situation, right? Where everything's awesome at the top and then you just fall into these pits of despair. You want to try to level out things so there's not that much discrepancy between the part that's rocking to the part that's, not, so to speak.
Yeah.
And getting people involved, right? So who should be involved? Where should the handoffs happen? And then it's creating clarity, connection, and cadence. So clarity, roles, responsibilities, expectations. Be explicit. Repeat back to me. Articulate to me what it is that you're supposed to be doing. What does this mean? Have people actually say it out loud. Because if you give them, do you understand? They'll say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then they sit at their desk and go, holy crap, I don't understand. And last time I asked a question, I got in trouble. So I'm not going to ask. So I'm either not going to do it, or I'm going to fake it, or, all of the bad things.
Mm-hmm.
So create this situation where there is an articulation back to, whoever is validating on what the role is, what the responsibilities are, and that the expectations are clear.
Mm-hmm.
And then create and enable communication. And that doesn't mean throw tools at it. Technology is not a panacea for all things.
Yeah.
Sorry to any vendor listening. You have to create the human connection. People have to understand that the upstream and the downstream of what they do, which is missing these days. People are heads down, ticking off the boxes of their list, not really thinking about what came before or what comes after. And unless you understand what you do and how that implicates or how that impacts the work downstream, then it's never going to be as good as it could be. And if you don't if people ahead of you don't understand, then there's always going to be challenges there. So it behooves us to understand the entire process, but particularly the bits that we impact either before or after. And then, of course, communication, right? Make sure that you're talking, make sure that there's calendars, there's workflows, things are being not just tracked and then left to, but actually monitored and measured and reacted to, right? Because measure, iterate, improve. Yeah. Measure what's going on. How do you make it better? And then make it better.
Nice. I like that. I love those 3 C's, clarity, connection, and cadence. I think that's a really important thing. And I think that's also something that when you enter a new organization or you're working with a new team, and to your point about technology, some people like to work differently to others, don't they? I mean, I'm working with a client at the moment and the guy likes to call you on WhatsApp. He doesn't want to use Slack. He doesn't want to, and you just go, well, I've got to accommodate that. It's how somebody, and when I used to run development teams near the beginning of my career, I had this incredible developer. He didn't like going to meetings. He wanted to sit in the dark and code. And so I just got out of my office and walked around to him to ask how he was getting on. And he loved that. He didn't want to go to any fucking meetings. So and I think that's it. So that's splendid. Thank you very much, Cathy. I learned a lot there about teams, and I'm presuming that the replay, I know it's not there as we speak right now, but I assume that at some point the replay of that webinar will be live on your website, which is 7thbear.com. And I'll include a link to, I think you just click on the events button, but I'll include a link to that in the show notes.
Thank you.
And while we're talking about your webinars, and I guess we will do that again maybe next time you come on the show, what's the next one?
So our next one is, we're getting a little cheeky as we lean into 7th Bear, and it's called the leadership trap: why CMOs are failing their businesses and how to fix it.
Oh my God, you are definitely coming back to talk about that one. That's so on point for this particular podcast. I'd love to hear how that goes. And I look forward to going on the webinar. So I'll include a link to that, Cathy, and I shall speak to you again in, a month or so when you've done that podcast? How do you feel about that?
Webinar. Happy to have a conversation with you anytime, Ian.
I look forward to it. I'll see you then, Cathy.
All right, cheers.
Cheers, bye-bye. Thank you, Cathy. Some fundamental advice there and proof in those client stories that you can have the perfect strategy, but if the team isn't right, you will find it tough. So that's a wrap on episode 257 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with it. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. You can find links to me, Cathy, her work at Seventh Bear, the webinar I refer to, and all the things we discussed in the show notes on rockstarcmo.com, as well as our blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes. We'd love to hear from you, so please reach out via the website or LinkedIn, but please let us know you're a listener. Just search Rockstar CMO. I'm sure you'll find us. The next episode of The Rose and Rockstar will drop on Saturday, and I'm midway through a conversation about writing books with Robert Rose. And next Wednesday in the studio, Jeff Clark will be back, and we plan to chat about broken B2B measurement. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week, and I hope you can join us here next time at Rockstar CMO FM.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennika Watkis-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennika, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennikawatkisporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.